All right, welcome to the first of its kind, world-changing manufacturers network. Lisa Ryan has her ears to the ground and her heart in the game. Get ongoing education and new connections right here with Lisa and the Manufacturers Network. Buckle your seat, listen, and spread the word. Here's Lisa.
Hey, it's Lisa Ryan. Welcome to the Manufacturers Network podcast. I'm excited to introduce our guest today, Mikhail Taver. He is the founder and managing partner of Taver Capital, a Delaware-based international venture capital firm specializing in investments in artificial intelligence companies worldwide. Over his 20-year career as a top executive with major financial groups and industrial companies, Mikhail has successfully closed more than 250 M&A and private equity deals. So, Mikhail, welcome to the show.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
So, share with us a little bit about your background and what led you to doing what you do.
I've always been what you might call a career investor. I started having an interest in investments back when I was about 7 years old, when I read Theodore Dreiser's trilogy. Chances are I did not understand the key messages, and safe to say that about 80% of the content, but I got interested in something that was shares and the very concept of that and how those things and investments can influence people's lives so much, and took it from there. I did my college and my university studies in investments and economics. Just was natural for me to start investing. I've spent a few years investing in sort of private equity in large financial groups, just like you said. Most of it was hardcore manufacturing, heavy industries, oil and gas, this sort of thing. Then I gradually became interested in venture capital, drifted there, and I've been happy there ever since. We started our first fund in 2016, and since I'm used to working in sort of compact teams, I was always knew that it's going to be a small team in my fund as well. So I needed to find a niche that was rather small or narrow, rather, but had good investment potential, which is why we decided to go for artificial intelligence back in 2016. It was a bit of an exotic beast. Not that many people actually heard about it, a lot less practiced it. So we shoot for that niche, and boy, was that a mistake. Of course, that was turned out to be as pervasive as it gets. It's nowhere near niche. Now, looking 8 years back, we realized that, but it was a nice mistake to make. So this is how I got into AI. And the first fund, we had 20 companies in the portfolio. We decided to test one of each. They all have AI in common, but they all come from different sectors. So we got cybersecurity, we got agriculture, we got sports, we've got, you name it, pretty much anything, regulatory startups. At this moment, I'm starting a second fund, which I'm planning to, again, I want to find a narrow niche now. Since AI is pretty much everywhere and everyone's doing that, it's becoming a bit of a commodity and boring. I decided to concentrate on industrial AI, which is AI in traditional old school industries such as manufacturing, oil and gas, resource mining, and things like that. That's where I am today.
You've been involved with AI almost since the beginning. So what are the biggest changes, or maybe the most surprising changes that you've seen in the 8 years since making that original mistake?
In fact, it's not 8 years, it's 25 years. The first time I faced AI was back in 1999 when I was
Really?
lucky enough to be doing my university studies at University of Edinburgh, which was the alma mater for Geoffrey Hinton, who got the recent Nobel Prize in Physics for actually being one of the godfathers of AI. So
Wow.
one of my courses touched upon AI as, again, something very niche, very small, very exotic. And obviously, there wasn't any computers that were able to process that at the time. I remember jotting my first neural net with a pencil and a piece of paper, trying to make it work. Obviously, that produced some results, right? They weren't that meaningful, to be honest. It was a nice experience, but nothing more than that. Fast forward to 2016, again, it was a niche thing. It just started. Yes, we as a humanity just figured out that we need to use GPUs in order to do a lot of parallel processing. That was useful for neural nets, but again, it was exotic, right? People started looking at it, talking about it, but nobody really practiced that. In those 8 years, that has become a quantum leap. The reason I'm investing in industrial AI is because industry is one of the very few niches that has not been not just touched, but significantly changed, disrupted by the use of artificial intelligence. Yes, we all know ChatGPT and OpenAI that came up with that a few years ago, but even before that, AI was pretty much everywhere. And yes, it's a huge change. It's becoming a commodity, just like I said. It's not just something out of the science fiction novels. It's something we use, and we don't even know that we use it. Telephones in our automobiles, anywhere. Pretty much it's a different world now, but it's still the same world, but it uses AI. I completely agree with people that call AI the new electricity. It's something that's just natural. It's just there now, and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, interesting. And you talked about manufacturing being one of the few areas that hasn't been totally changed by it, but they're going to need to for the most part. So what do you think that manufacturers should prioritize when they start considering the different AI solutions they can use?
First, I would say that they need to prioritize using AI solutions, which it seems to be a choice at the moment, which it isn't. You have to do that, otherwise you're just going to lose in your competition. And you just start small, because I see lots of solutions that were used 5 years ago and just starting to make their way to the manufacturing and producing significant results. It's not even that difficult or that expensive to try that. So just priority number one, just do AI, acknowledge it, and don't be afraid to implement that changes.
Yeah, it's so funny you say, because you had mentioned ChatGPT and OpenAI, and of course I'm a super user just about every day. It has just helped me so much in my business as a solopreneur. But it's shocking to me the number of my friends, many of whom are much younger than me, who are afraid of it, who don't use it. And that's exactly what I tell them. Just use it. Just play with it. See what it can do, and then start to figure out for yourself. Because once you start playing with it and you see how really easy it is to incorporate into daily life, it becomes a lot easier. But I think it's just a lot of it is getting over that initial fear, or just fear of making a mistake or screwing things up or whatever, but just do it.
Exactly, but then chances are you might make another mistake, which comes after you go past that barrier, and you start having inflated expectations. Again, we all grew up reading science fiction and watching starship movies, and the very name artificial intelligence, it's a bit of a problem with that name, because it suggests something that is cognitive and robotic and fantastic, and we start trusting it a lot more than we should. We should always remember that it's just a tool, and it is of limited use, right? You can't use it everywhere, which is something that some corporations tend to do. Things don't work out, go for AI. It's not a universal solution. It's just another tool in your toolbox.
Really good point. So how do you think that AI is transforming the manufacturing process as far as some of the key applications that you're seeing, and then, of course, the benefits of using it?
There's, just like I said, I would say it's not transforming the industry yet. It's just starting to get there, which is why I want to get ahead of the line and start investing there. But there's a lot of potential for many different users. You can take some portfolio companies from the first fund. I've got a company that uses AI to find mineral deposits. It does it a lot quicker. The whole industry made, I think it was 43 mineral discoveries in 2023, spending about $150 billion on that. My portfolio company had 4 in half a year and spent just a few million on that. It's a lot cheaper, it's a lot faster, it's a lot more precise, and they spoil a lot less environment in the process, which is a very nice benefit to have. I've seen use cases, the obvious use case for any sort of manufacturer or any factory is using computer vision to just monitor people, making sure they go where they should and don't go where they shouldn't, wear protective gloves and helmets and stuff like that. These are very easy and intuitive solutions, but it's not that common for current manufacturers to use them. There are a lot more sort of complicated things, such as digital twins, optimizing quantities of various chemical additives, but these are very complex solutions, and you have a lot easier stuff that is easy to implement, cheap, like I said, and has dramatic effect on your output already. So there's a lot of that. There's plenty of stuff like diagnosing errors in advance by vibration and stuff like that. So this is your predictive maintenance. You don't have to be surprised by your machine breaking down. It's going to do that in about half a year in advance, and you have plenty of time to order spare parts. Just point your finger anywhere in the manufacturing process. There's plenty of uses for AI there because it's not there at the moment.
It's interesting when you talked about discovering mineral deposits. So are they just putting in the numbers as far as the landscape of the land, and then AI is narrowing down the places to search for it? That's so fascinating.
They're using NASA satellite data to find very much oversimplified that by finding distortions in the geomagnetic field of the Earth.
Okay. Wow.
It's a classic sort of startup story. The founder was doing his geology PhD in one of Australian universities, got fed up with the academics, dropped out and manually created a neural net, ran it over Australia, found about 150 or something like that potential deposits, compared it to the actual map of the existing mines, found that about 100 of those are very good working mines. And just went for the startup, dropped me a cold message on LinkedIn. I invested, and here we are.
Wow, that's really fascinating. So and you touched on a few of them, but what are you seeing as far as the biggest challenges that manufacturers are facing when implementing AI?
The first one is actually the actual reluctance to actually make the decision to go for it and start using that. You also have a lot of internal, I wouldn't say opposition, people who are not prepared to acknowledge that. So you have to manage this process very thoroughly. Otherwise, you're going to get sabotaged, right? People are not going to accept that. They hear and read a lot of alarming newspaper articles about how AI is going to replace and take all their jobs away, and so on and so forth. So you have to manage it on the people's level, not just technical level. Obviously, where do you get your AI solutions? Some companies start internal departments, and some companies start corporate venture funds, which I'm not a huge fan of, because these are two different universes. Startups, fast-moving, risk-bearing, the risk-taking, compared to corporations, slow behemoths that are not, prepared to take risks. They would rather keep things as they are. And losing the competition, of course, but that's the problem of the day after tomorrow. And today they're happy with that. You need to understand how these things work. Probably talk to people like me, talk to venture funds that kind of can serve as an API, right? If we take computer sort of jargon between the startup and the corporation, they need to understand that they're different. The corporations need to understand how startups work and think, and startups, of course, need to understand how the corporations work. Otherwise, they just won't match, and there is going to be a huge disappointment for both of them.
Yeah. Let's go back to the workforce, because you mentioned people potentially sabotaging it because they think it's going to take away their jobs. Now, mind you, AI is going to replace some jobs, but we have to still. How are you seeing companies getting that buy-in, making their employees more comfortable with it, maybe getting them involved in the process so that there is not that amount of fear, and reducing the risk of sabotage going on?
You have to do a lot of negotiation, a lot of talking, a lot of educating and explaining things to the workforce. You have to make sure that they understand that they're not going to lose their income, right, or a job due to AI. It is going to change, but it's normal. A person with AI is a lot more powerful than a person without AI. We've seen that before with the weaving machines, right, back in 1800s when they were invented, and you had those loop discs, they were practically destroying that. But look at what happened to the fabric manufacturing. They used to make, I think it was 500,000 tons in the UK. And in 20 years, they became, I think they started producing something like 16 million tons or something like that. This is a 30-time increase. And you did not get that many starving people on the streets losing their jobs. They became able to produce a lot more. Same happened in the US with Whitney coming up with an engine, right, for cotton processing, I believe, that increased the output by 50 times, right? And what happened? Nobody lost their jobs. They just started needing a lot more resources. So they actually created a lot more jobs, right? They needed raw materials for that, huge jump in production. This is how I would go about this. Plus, you have to explain to the workforce that this is an inevitable thing.
Right.
Because if they don't accept this and they don't accept this, I don't know, empowerment by AI, then our corporation or your corporation is going to gradually and then suddenly lose in the competition. And the factory is just going to get closed and they're going to lose their job anyway.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Again, looking at everything that we were afraid of. I think that there was, back in the days when the car were invented, they said if we had asked the people what they wanted, they would have wanted faster horses.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you're looking for manufacturers that are starting to implement AI in their manufacturing, what are some tips for a successful transition? We talked about that communication with the workforce probably being goal number one, because without that buy-in, you risk it not being successful. But what would it be some other key tips?
We've touched upon the sort of this lacuna in communication between a startup and a corporation. On the corporation side, I would, just like I said, I would talk to the funds, I would talk to someone who knows the startup landscape, and I would probably employ a person in the position that is kind of, how would you say, a translator, right? An advocate or a Sherpa, right, between the corporation and the startup. Now, I know Google had this, being technologically advanced corporation, they still realized that they were a corporation and they needed a person in charge of teaching startups how to deal with that corporation. You need a sort of ambassador, if you will. And there is a thing called a chief digital officer. You can name it that, or you can whatever, but you need some sort of an interface between that. That's very important. And once you start implementing that, obviously you should take the interests of a startup and the DNA of a startup into account. Otherwise, you're just going to blow the whole thing away by ordering way too many units in a month or something like that, and being disappointed that a startup can do it. Start gradually, start rolling out, start doing pilots. Don't be afraid to pay for the pilots, because the startup needs to survive, right? But yeah, and once you do get a hang of it, don't use it as a universal solution. That's a very important tip. I've seen corporations using RPA, the robotic process automation, and they use it when it's necessary, and then gradually start using it to fill every hole that there is, which is not the right way to do. Then you start counting your budget, understanding that it doesn't work, start getting disappointed in technology, and this is basically like using a screwdriver for nails, right? Just the wrong tool.
So you've mentioned the collaboration between startups and manufacturers several times. There's an inherent risk in working with startups because they are just getting started. How do you reduce the risk in choosing the right startup to work with when implementing some of these processes?
I would transfer the management of that risk to people who are used to dealing with startups. I don't do that directly. Either, like I said, employ a person who knows the ropes, or deal with the venture funds or investment funds that take away some of those risks. It's their job to make sure that the startup does not get destroyed in the process.
Okay. So is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish that I would have when it comes to topics that it's important for manufacturers to know about in this AI process?
I think we've touched upon pretty much everything, probably not too deep, but wide enough for people to start thinking, and which is probably the main point of our startup. Not startups, of our podcast.
Okay. If people did want to continue the conversation and learn more about you and what you do and just find out how you may be able to help them, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
I always read any of my incoming communication. They're welcome to ping me on LinkedIn, write me an email, just find me on social networks, and we'll get in touch.
Okay. All right, Mikhail, it was such a pleasure having you on the show today. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
I'm Lisa Ryan, and this is the Manufacturers Network Podcast. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Manufacturers Network Podcast. Do me a favor and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues so we can grow this network and connect more fantastic folks just like you. You can either send your buddies to the website at manufacturers-network.com or share the Manufacturers Network podcast on your LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or wherever you and your industry friends hang out. The bigger and faster we grow the network, the stronger and deeper the community we'll all have. Thanks again, and I appreciate you.